Before we took this commercial break, we were talking to our very distinguished guest today, Dr. Shaidul, curator, photographer and writer, and chief of DRIC and Pathshala South Asia Media, and a host of other. He's also very actively involved in the human rights work in Bangladesh and worldwide. Yes, sir. When did this idea come to your mind that you have to establish a photographic institute in Bangladesh and provide training to not only just our own people, but those in South Asia?
Well, it started essentially, I mean, when we started DRIC, the idea really was that we would create a platform for indigenous practitioners. As we went along, we realized if we wanted to fight a war, we needed an army.
Right.
And that was what needed to be built, skilled professionals.
Only ambush will not do.
Well, exactly, yeah. So we had started doing some training in DRIC itself. At that time, I was the president of the Bangladesh Photographic Society.
You were there for 3 terms, isn't it?
Yes, and while that was, we work collaboratively, DRIC and the Photographic Society, we started running some workshops, which were good, we ran well, but we found that they were not really very effective in the long term because the energy, we got great trainers from all across the world. I arm twisted my friends into coming and teaching, which they did, they were very generous, but we felt every time we were starting from zero. And we felt that really what we needed was a proper educational structure whereby there would be a curriculum, there would be continuity, and there would be a direction in the educational process. So on the 18th of December 1998, we took advantage of a seminar that was being organized by the World Press Photo Foundation. I was involved as a member of a jury with World Press, and I argued with them that part of what needed to be done was really train photographers in these countries. So there was the first set of seminars took place in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Zimbabwe, Peru, and Bangladesh. And I used that opportunity to launch the School of Photography, which since has become really well known internationally. I mean, it is, in professional circles, it's recognized as probably the finest school of photography in the world.
So most of the media in Bangladesh, particularly print media, do they employ now your graduates?
Yes, they do, which is rather nice for us. I mean, the fact that in the major newspapers, the majority of the photographers happen to be Pathshala alumni. But not only that, it also has meant that these newspapers have changed. Their outlook, the way in which they use images, it's much more dynamic, it's much more interesting. And they have also
it's much more positive.
Not just positive, I think images are used in a far more creative way than they used to be before. To the fact that they now employ picture editors, which they never used to do. Right. And in fact, the picture editors also happen to be former Pathshala students. So that aspect certainly is working. But now we are training in other countries as well. We train, we run international residency programs, so we have students from North America, Europe, Australia, Japan, China, India, who come to Bangladesh because that's where the best.
You said you train in other countries.
That we also do. In fact, I'm here now in Britain running a workshop.
You're running a seminar or
yes,
workshop?
I mean, last month I was involved in a seminar in Oxford. Tomorrow, well, you'll be broadcasting this on Thursday, won't you?
Yep.
So on the 21st, I have a workshop at Rich Mix. But this is part of an ongoing program that we'll be doing with Rich Mix, where we will be engaging with the youth in Britain, helping them.
Is it across the board, the members? Or
yes, yes, it is. But we will be teaching them storytelling skills, helping them talk about their own experiences, helping them tell their own stories, in much the way we've been doing it in Bangladesh. But we've since run international workshops, not since, we've been running international workshops in Egypt, in Myanmar. Next year we're going to be doing it in China. So we run major international workshops in other countries where students from different parts of the globe come over, and our teachers go over and teach.
When you talk about storytelling, I mean, they come with a theme, a particular end?
In these workshops, generally what happens is the students will submit. They will first do some research. They will submit their story ideas. We will look at them, do a reality check on them, give them feedback. Once they arrive, then they might further fine-tune it, because it's one thing to make a decision from far away, another when you actually arrive on the land. But essentially, our interest has always been related to issues of social justice, equality. But we don't make it very rigid. I think it's important for the artist, the photographer, to express his or her own point of view.
Feel free to.
Well, exactly. That creativity is something we have to allow for.
Right.
And they will take on whatever story they find interesting, important to tell to the world at large. And to a large extent, I think it is about telling untold stories.
There's somewhere I read about, this, your majority world's work is about telling the world unheard stories, and you just said untold stories. That's a bit different to me.
Well, the term majority world itself is something I need to tell you about, because for a long time, I mean, I told you about that story in Belfast before, and I think it also comes from the lexicon, from the words that I use define who we are. So we've always been defined as those who have not.
Yeah, developing the
third world, exactly. Third world, least developed countries, developing world, exactly. So they're the first and we're the third. Why should we accept these definitions?
Right.
I think it's time to question it. And one of the things which is worth remembering is when the leaders of the G8 countries make decisions for us, it's time for us to remind them that they happen to be representatives of 13% of the world's population. We are the majority.
Right.
And if democracy, which they waxed lyrical about constantly, is something they believe in, it is about time our voice was heard and our point of view was taken into...
But can beggars be choosers?
I don't think we're beggars. I think it's the other way around. I mean, if you look...
Why do we get aid then?
We get aid because it's convenient for aid givers to give us aid. I don't think we need aid.
Is it convenient for us to receive aid?
No, and I wish we had people with spine in our administration, in our governance, who had the audacity and the courage to say we don't need it. I don't think we do. What we do need is better trade terms, which we do not get. What we do need is
maybe better training.
Certainly, we need to develop our skills, and partnership is something I've always believed in. But I think it's a two-way street. And if you really analyze aid, and if you look at it, for every dollar that comes in, I think more dollars flow out. So it's a myth.
Well, who takes them away?
For a start, you look at how aid money is distributed. A lot of it goes into projects which are wasteful. A lot of it employs expensive foreign consultants, most of whom we do not need, and the money flows back out again.
Right.
Most of them require us to do things.
On the housing and the cars and...
all of that sort of thing. And if you actually do a proper economic study, I think our nations profit far less from that than it is made out. And at the end of the day, how it's a percentage of the countries that give money give a fraction of a percentage of their GDP, and the money that we receive is a fraction of the GDP of our own foreign income. Our heroes are the garment workers, the migrant workers, the farmers, the entrepreneurs. They're the ones who really earn for our country, yet they're not valued. With a relatively small amount of foreign aid that is given, foreign countries have huge clout over our countries. No way would a foreign nation be allowed to interfere in a nation's sovereignty in the way in which it happens in our countries.
Like some ambassadors are more visible than our own ministers.
Absolutely, and are far more powerful in that sense. But, I mean, I think if you're being honest, there's no such thing as morality in international politics. They do it because they get away with it.
Right.
And they get away with it because our politicians, our leaders allow them to get away with it. If our politicians were not as spineless as they are, I think things would be very different.
Do you think that in future we'll stop seeking aid and then we'll be able to run our administration in a much on a better system and better streamlined?
I think we need to be better run, without a doubt, better managed, more efficient systems. I think despite our politicians, despite all the things that go wrong, countries like Bangladesh, what, 6% GDP on a regular basis?
Right.
How many countries can boast that? And that country has been doing so well, not because of our governance system, but despite it.
Right.
Certainly, there are things that need to be curbed and stopped. There's huge corruption, though that corruption also involves international players, sadly.
It's also waste, isn't it?
There's waste, there's corruption, there's inequality. There are lots of things wrong. I'm not trying to brush it under the carpet by any means. There's a huge amount that is right as well. And I think if we look at it from a historical perspective, the wealth of the world was in India and China.
True.
That is why the colonizers came to our countries. They've sucked the wealth, made their own nations wealthy, and now we have to suffer the consequences. But, I'm not just harping back. I think the onus is upon us to ensure that we stand up for ourselves and do what is right. And certainly we ourselves have a lot to blame. I'm not taking that away. But I think, to a large extent, a better run country with equitable terms and with the rest of the world as partners would be better.
Better run country, but who is going to run? Do we have good technocrats? Could we have better technocrats, better educated people?
We have some people, not enough.
You are, say, a professor too, so I'm asking you, how is the education system coping?
That is a weakness. It's a good point that you make. Certainly, we have an education system that is wanting at many levels. It can and will be improved. I think, having said that, there are gains that have been made. Significant gains have been made in primary education. I think in terms of other indices for development, Bangladesh has done well. Certainly better than India or Pakistan or many of our neighbors. That's not good enough. I think far more certainly is needed. But I'll come back to what you were talking about. I mean, you look at the finest people in our country, the finest brains, the finest intellects. Most of them are sucked away by foreign countries who have invested nothing in their development. A poor country like Bangladesh creates doctors, engineers, creative people in all those fields. We invest in people who then go elsewhere to serve other countries who have invested nothing on those people.
Well, how to suck them back?
I think what is beginning to happen is that people are beginning to realize that Bangladesh is a land of opportunity. The real energy is out there, not here. I mean, Europe is a decaying space. The growth sector is in countries like Asia, countries in Asia, and really that's where the energy is. I think that is also something which the new youth are beginning to recognize, and that shift is beginning to take place. While that happens, we need people who are able to negotiate the best terms for us. I mean, I'll digress slightly, but let me give you the example. I mean, we had the military takeover. I mean, this supposed caretaker government that came in last, effectively it was a military government. It was a military government that was put in place by the European Union, by the United States. And while these countries talk about democracy and freedom, they're far happier with a pliant dictator than they are with a messy democracy.
Yep.
We want our messy democracy.
It's easy to handle one person rather than the whole bunch of...
It was during that relatively short period of time that so many deals were made which were damaging to my country, where all these multinationals got their perks, got their special deals, got huge benefits, which have bled my country. And I think the politicians, despite the critique I have of them, have actually served our country better than these autocrats have.
Great. On this very happy note, we take another break. And when we come back, we'll discuss further the situation of Bangladesh and the contribution of so many organizations that Dr. Shaidul Alam has established. Okay, viewers, don't go away. We'll be back soon.